Hello everybody, here we are today talking about the St. Louis Blues and why they were a bit of a weird team. So before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So if you enjoyed my video about the Blues yesterday, then you're going to love this video today where I talk again about this team. And I know in the previous video we talked about how the Blues were a hard team to get a read on, and I think a big part of that stems from last season. So a huge part of that in my eyes is because they played up to competition, but they also played down to the competition. In terms of playing up to the competition, there's a few things that I want to highlight with this team, and it kind of stems with them having a points percentage of .500 or better. And this comes against teams like the Boston Bruins, Carolina Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, New York Rangers, and Vegas Golden Knights. What are some common themes with these teams? Well, with the Rangers, they won the President's Trophy. With a team like the Hurricanes, they've been a really good team in recent years. The Florida Panthers ended up winning the Stanley Cup. The Boston Bruins were right there behind them for the Atlantic Division title. And the Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup back in 2023. So they were holding their ground against some teams that were really good. And it's not even just them. They ended up posting a 4-2 record overall against the teams like Vancouver and Los Angeles. Now I know Los Angeles isn't as good as a team like Vancouver, but the Canucks ended up going out there and winning their division, kind of highlighting again what you're seeing, teams that were winning their divisions, that were going to the conference finals. Mind you, they had a perfect record, I think, against the Edmonton Oilers, and were just able to get the job done against some quality sides, some of the best that the league has to offer. You could point even further to this by looking at the games that they played against the Dallas Stars, a team that made it to the Western Conference Final that has been amazing over the past few years. They ended up taking 6 out of 8 possible points against Dallas, winning 2 of those games. And this group, this list that you see, are just like, wow, if you would have seen this and seen how the Blues played, you would have thought that they would have been a for sure playoff team. But then you get into the other side, you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they've done this. And it kind of helps explain partially why they weren't able to make it to the postseason this past year. And this is where it gets a little bit fun as you're looking at their matchups against teams like the Arizona Coyotes, the Columbus Blue Jackets, and the San Jose Sharks. And you're probably imagining at this point in the season, oh yeah, these are going to be possibly some very easy wins. And looking at 2 of these 3 teams in Columbus and San Jose, they didn't even crack 30 wins. But what was St. Louis's combined record against these teams? 2-6-1, with just 2 of their wins coming against the Arizona Coyotes, meaning they went winless against Columbus and San Jose. And that's kind of a problem, right? Because what are San Jose and Columbus? They are 2 teams that are quite literally some of the worst in the NHL. 2 of the 4 worst teams in the league overall. And I'm going to throw this out there because we did talk about it at some point. I couldn't find the video. I swear I did a video talking about this earlier in the year. But yeah, St. Louis was the only team, I believe, in the entire NHL last season that went winless against the San Jose Sharks. And it was bad. They lost game 1, 5-1. Then they ended up getting shut out, I believe, in game 2 of their season series, 4-0. And then in game 3, they would go on to lose it in overtime, but they needed to come back down from 2-0 in that game. And this is where you realize, oh my gosh, they got 1 out of 6 possible points against San Jose. And circling back to a team like Arizona, they lost, I think, 14 games in a row at one point in the season. And when you realize that they performed so poorly against teams like that, you can kind of understand, oh, well, I can see why maybe they didn't make the playoffs. So what exactly is my point in making this video? Am I here to just dunk on St. Louis fans? Absolutely not. But I did say in my video yesterday, just because they finished the year hot doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a team that's going to go out there and be a playoff caliber side. They have had, again, 2 years where they've been outside of the playoffs. They have lost their cup-winning head coach, which I'm not exactly sure how much that impacted them because, again, they're able to have a better year. But there's just been a lot of things going against them in recent seasons. And yes, you could look at the fact that they played amazing against some of the league's best teams. But I do worry a little bit that people are going to say, well, yeah, we beat the good teams last year and we should be even better this year. And we've got these young guys that are growing that are on long-term extension, so they don't have to worry about that. And we're going to go out there and beat up on these bad teams, even though we didn't necessarily do that all of last season. But I will say, that is truly optimistic. I try to see myself relatively neutral. I know sometimes people think maybe I'm biased one way or the other, but you can't just say, yeah, we're going to play very well against some of the league's best teams, and that's going to happen again, because that right there is just hard to deal with. And I guess in my eyes, I see it like this. If they went 2-6-1 against Arizona, Columbus, and San Jose, even if they picked up 3 more wins, that's just 6 more points. That puts them at 98 points. Is it even a guarantee they're going to go out there and win the division? Certainly not. Make the wild card? Maybe. But you can't just say they're going to do that and then suddenly be able to be an elite team, because they wouldn't be. They still have to find ways to beat other teams. They still have to find ways to play hockey cohesively. We talked about how yesterday their power play needs to get better. They probably need more scoring from like their bottom 6, especially their blue line, as Parayko drove that the most in terms of goal scoring from blue liners. but there's just a lot of things that you can point out and say, well, these are odd. And yes, they probably will go out there and beat San Jose at one point this upcoming season, especially because while San Jose is better, they got thrashed 2 times earlier in the year against Pittsburgh and Vancouver, and they allowed 10 goals. I'm not saying they're going to be that bad, but I am saying that St. Louis will probably get to bounce back in some way, in some fashion, knowing that they want to be able to say, we weren't the only winless team against the league's worst team in the league. But I am saying, with the good comes the bad, and fortunes will probably switch some way or the other over the course of the year. Do I want St. Louis to be in the playoffs? Honestly, probably yeah. I think that it's kind of fun. I think especially when they and Chicago were really good, it was super exciting, and I almost wish that St. Louis would have been more competitive in that time, where maybe they would have won a cup earlier to make that rivalry even better. But we are looking at this team right now and realizing they're not going to win the Stanley Cup, probably, and that's okay. But we also have to realize that in recent years, one year that the Blues made it, I think in 2022, they were scoring way more goals than they were expected to, and people kept saying, I think even on here, basically being like, well, yeah, you're undermining what they've done. They had over 100 points this year, and they've been able to score a lot of goals. And then they played, what was it, the Avs, and had to come back from 3-0 in that series just to lose in Game 6. So let's, cool down a little bit, see how they start out the year, and then watch maybe about halfway through the season and see if this team is actually able to be there in the playoff talk. And again, I would really like it. I like when there are a lot of teams in the mix and nobody's really out early, and I don't think St. Louis will be, but just kind of talking about how this team that's been a little bit weird in recent years, especially last season, isn't necessarily just going to be a juggernaut next year. Not saying that a lot of people are saying that, but I have heard people talking about how their expectations are significantly higher. But I do think, like we talked about in yesterday's video, the Central Division has got a lot of good teams, and even the teams that are more of the bottom feeders are going to be better. Chicago should be better. Looking at Utah, their blue line is going to be better. I did a video over them recently, and they were at like an 81 or 82 point pace for the year. So let's cool it off a little bit. This isn't like a couple years ago where you had LA, Anaheim, and San Jose being atrocious in the division and thinking, oh, well, we're probably a luck if you're a Pacific team to at least be top 3 or in the hunt. It's going to be tough. And for the Blues, I guess we'll see what happens. But anyway, what are your thoughts for St. Louis for this upcoming year? Do you think they'll be a little bit less weird than what we saw this past season? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you go love hockey, all right? Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.